For historical context and more information, see the description below.
This afternoon, a large number of visitors are going to call on other members of the congregation. They are not going to ask for money. I repeat, they are not going to ask for money. They are not even going as missionaries to the heathen. Thoreau once said, "If I knew for a certainty that a man was coming to my house with the conscious design of doing me good, I should run for my life." Now, there are many who share that view. These people are going to call to enrich the fellowship of our church, to tighten the ties that bind, to get information that will enable us to know our congregation the better, to get ideas from the congregation for the improvement of our program, and in these days of flux and of dangerous confusion, to help us to meet the demands that there are constantly being placed before the church. And we hope that it also may stimulate people in the attendance at church. And it's to this that I want to speak especially. Many of the folk that you visit will not have been in church this morning. Many will not even have listened in over the air. You recall that after the resurrection, when the doors were shut and the disciples were assembled for fear of their lives, that Jesus came and stood in the midst of them. And the disciples were delighted to see him, but we're told that Thomas, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. Now, I'm not likening those who have attended church this morning to the disciples, nor even those who are absent to Thomas, excepting in a very general sense. Thomas was not present in the place where there was an excellent chance for fellowship with Christ, a chance for fellowship with Christ that he was not going to get when he was away from the group. Now, there are hordes of people who are guilty of that. Like Thomas, they may have a very good reason. And it may be good for the visitor to discuss those reasons with the visited and to attempt to decide whether or not there's any real validity in them. I can hear, for instance, several of the visited making the same comment as a certain young man. He had informed his parents that he was very much in love, and he was telling them about her. And gradually it crept up upon the consciousness of these parents that their son had fallen in love, and the time had come for them to ask some questions themselves. And so the father asked the question, "Where does she go to church?" And the boy said, "She doesn't." And when he noted that the father was apparently still waiting for some further answer, the boy said, "Dad, you don't seem to realize that in this world, a lot of good people don't go to church." Now, of course, it was a very valid answer. And we can expect that kind of comment this afternoon from good people. They tell us that they live by the golden rule as well as they can. They think that they are just as good as a lot of those hypocrites who find their way into the church. They're thinking, of course, the kind of person that A.A. Millen talked about, who had 2 top hats and just 1 hat box. On Monday morning, he put away God reverently for the week, and he took out mammon. Or they may talk about the lack of general significance of the Christian church today, and that there are so many things they feel they can do on Sunday morning that are going to be more helpful to them, just as Thomas doubted that Christ was alive and that there was any real significance in going to seek him any longer. I think of one minister who had gotten into the habit of preaching without very much preparation. And so Sunday after Sunday, he struggled through his sermon and he never quite seemed to get it off the ground. One morning, however, he was pulled up rather sharply. He was shaking hands with the people as they left the church, and he recognized one man to be a stranger. He said to him, "We're happy to have you worshiping with us today, and we hope you will come again." And the stranger made a comment in one devastating word. The word was, "Why?" I can't imagine anything much more devastating than that. Probably the same kind of feeling than when we're hoping we're going to get through the pearly gates, and Peter says, "Why?" There may be some who will ask that question today, not only because of the sermons, but against this whole background of the threatening world in which we're living, and they don't feel that the church is as meaningful as it once was. In some cases, it may not only come from the visited, but it may be very strongly in the subconscious of the visitor as well. So let's think for a few moments on this matter of going to church. Those of us who have the habit, it may strengthen us in that habit, and perchance it may also stimulate a few who do not have the habit. At the outset, in defense of the church, let's make this emphatically clear: the church has no corner on hypocrisy. It's a disease that has been brought in from the outside, for it's certainly not in the teaching of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's in people before it's in churches. And even if we try to get away from others, we may still find ourselves living with hypocrisy because we may not be able to get away from ourselves. Anyway, isn't it good that the hypocrites, the sinners, are in the church where we can get a few good licks at them? The same thing came up when we were discussing the matter of the loaves and the fishes. People criticized the fact that some young people who were smoking marijuana went to the loaves and fishes. And they didn't seem to realize that we were in business in the loaves and fishes just in the hope that those people would come to us where we could get a chance at them. And to criticize the loaves and the fishes because of the marijuana would be like criticizing the Salvation Army because a drunk went in and asked for help. It's good to have some of the people who aren't too sincere coming to church in the hope that some of the seeds may not fall on barren ground. It's one of the great glories of the church that whosoever will may come. And it stands forth in the community not because it is good, because though rather it is pointing people to that which is good. And there's a difference. Margaret London, in one of her writings, said, "Outside the Christian church, where do you find the stubborn conviction that the poor, the sick, the filthy, and the leper are worthy of reverence in the form of care because man was made in the image of God? hospitals, schools, all the attempts of our imperfect civilization to solve the problems of the individual come out of the concept of man's importance as something more than just an animal. For if God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son into the world for us, then we must be worth something in his sight. Well, the church has stood for that, in spite of those who have had very little to do with her. Her people are not perfect, nor do they claim perfection. As a matter of fact, do you realize that the Christian church is the only institution in existence whose membership is based upon the qualification that the candidate shall be unworthy of membership? But they're at least lining up with an institution that would point them to a higher way. Regarding attendance at church, I believe that every person needs the lift that comes from worshiping here, worshiping God in the public place. There are good people who don't go to church. But I submit that they would be better people if they did go to church. It's all very well for them to say that they can worship God in the golf course, and they can worship God in the beauty of nature, or they can worship God sitting in front of a lovely fireplace, and how true it is, but how many people do? On the golf course, if one is not getting a good score, I'm quite certain that his mood is not conducive to worship. At least I know mine isn't. That's why I think a minister should always play golf on Monday so that he can get a chance to prepare himself for the next Sunday for 6 days. And excellent as these moments are alone for meditation, they're just no substitute for the public worship of God. The fact is that people are going to worship something. It may be power, it may be success, it may be a lot of things, but they're going to worship something. And it's the church that keeps reminding them that we should not only be a nation, but we should be individual people under God. And in the midst of it, we're reminded of a certain grandeur, a certain stature. We're reminded of a higher, a holier dimension of life that we so easily forget. Other great experiences take place in church. For the strong, it's a humbling experience. For the weak, it's an uplifting one. In the sanctuary, we are reminded that regardless of race, color, or creed, our souls have all got an even start before God. We're reminded here of the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. And in the sanctuary, frequently life's bafflements aren't quite as baffling as they were. Recall in Pilgrim's Progress where Christian went to the house of the interpreter. I had not read Pilgrim's Progress when I first heard a sermon preached upon this section. It was preached by an elderly gentleman in his 80s. And I shall never forget with that faltering voice when he read that the interpreter took him and showed him the picture of one who had his eyes lifted up to heaven, and the best of books in his hand, and the law of truth was written upon his lips, and the world was behind his back, and he stood as if he were pleading with men. Not much Holy Scripture superior to that. And people have come to church and they have talked with the interpreter and they have been helped immensely. I remember once about the famed Professor Elliott at Harvard. Students were required to sign a statement that they had not received any help in answering the examination questions. One lad approached the professor and with a very straight face, he said, "Professor Elliott, I cannot sign this statement. I was asking God for help all the way through the examination." Dr. Elliott picked up the boy's paper and he quickly looked through it. And with just as straight a face, he says, "It's all right, son, you can sign the paper. You didn't get any help." Well, if the boy was sincerely praying, he did get some help. May not have been just what he wanted. But if he was not prepared for that examination, the best answer that he could get from God was no, when he tried to get God to do his work for him. There is a help that comes from God. Now, I remember Dr. Kerr saying one time in that great hymn in which one of the stanzas finished with the words, "Give me the patience of unanswered prayer," Dr. Kerr saying, there is no such thing. And there isn't. There's no such thing as unanswered prayer. Something happens when we pray. And the mere fact that it isn't just as we wanted it to be doesn't mean that an answer has not come. And we're conscious of a presence, and we're conscious of a lift that has been given to the soul. Alfred Noyes said of his father, "If I ever had any doubts about the fundamental realities of religion, they could always be distilled by one memory: the light on my father's face as he came back from early communion." Some of us can remember that. The light on our parents' face, or the light on the face of somebody that we respected and loved after he had come from church or had come from Holy Communion. Remember the old gentleman who had a set of tails, morning coat? He only wore them on 2 occasions. First, when he went to church on Sunday, and secondly, when he went to the polls to vote. He felt that he just ought to be dressed up a bit special for both occasions. For here was a great privilege. Alfred Noyes' father had been to the house of the interpreter, and he knew it. And there was a light in his face, and I'm sure there was a conduct in his life that indicated it. And the thing that troubles me about so much of the younger generation of parents is that their children are not going to have memories like that. Sunday morning, the memory of Dad reading the morning paper or going out to play golf or washing the car or repairing something about the house. But not that thing that Alfred Noyes had when he said that there was just something special about his dad when he was coming away from early communion. Someone said I go to church on Sundays to get the batteries of the soul recharged. Remember that classic of Oliver Wendell Holmes? I have in my heart a small, shy plant called reverence, and I cultivate that on Sunday morning. Pretty good habit. This little shy plant called reverence. Shy, I suppose, because it's humble, because it's meek in the sense that Christ spoke of meekness. And he just didn't feel right unless he cultivated it, unless he watered it a bit every Sunday morning. Faith, patience, they can wear down. The power to endure, courage, stick-to-itiveness, these things can wear down, and they can wear down so quickly. The house of the interpreter is a place of renewal. Tell some of your friends that, will you? Oh, there will be times when the results will not be miraculous. Maybe more like what happened to the woman who said that she had been to church, but she couldn't remember a word that the minister had said, and what in the world was the use of going to church if she couldn't get any better consequence than that? And her friend advised her to go and get her wooden clothes basket and turn on the faucet and fill it with water and bring it back. And the woman said, "You're crazy. All the water would have run out." Yes, but the woman says in the process, the basket would have been cleaned a little, wouldn't it? Now, sometimes this may be all that comes from a church service. But before God, if we're coming to church to worship God, and if we're seeking, we're going to go from this place feeling a little cleaner, if nothing else, even if all the water seems to have run out, and even if the preacher apparently would better have stayed at home. But there's more if we really look for it. And behind it all is the basic truth that a man who bows down to nothing can never really bear the burden of himself. Get that? A man who bows down to nothing can never really bear the burden of himself. I sit in the center of myself, and I weave busy thoughts like a black spider making her web. And I'm so intent on my own spinning, I can see nothing but the whirling of my own mind. If I could get straight away from the center of my own weaving and kneel down, I might indeed perceive God himself. But the little shuttles of thoughts, they fly so fast, I'm deafened by their whir, entangled in my own web and choked by the ephemera of self. Well, all of us need to rise above that. And every Christian needs to be reminded of it. And we need to be reminded, too, that we not only need the church, but the church needs us. Society needs us as a witness to the things for which the church stands. It needs the kind of example it can give. Don't our young people need it in this day? Example of parents and of relatives going off to church on Sunday morning. People setting the example for them to go to God's house. Many of those young people are looking a very critical eye at the institution of the church, and much of that is deserved. But they're not going to become reconciled merely by being told things that the church represents. Patrick Henry said, "I have now disposed of all my property to my family. There's one thing more I wish I could give to them, and that's the Christian religion. If they had that and I had not given them 1 shilling, they would have been rich. And if they had not that, and I had given them the whole world, they would be poor." Say that to some of the people that aren't sending their children or bringing their children to church school, will you? We can't give other people religion. All we can do by our lives is to give witness to a faith that's in us, in the hopes that others will be attracted. All we can do is stand up and be counted. You remember what Dick Shepherd said to a group of non-church goers? "For the Lord's sake, my brother or sister, come over to help us to be better. Believe that we know how terribly often we fail. If you have no alternative to offer for the salvation of man, if you have no friend to offer more strengthening or compelling than Jesus Christ, then don't hold back because of our failures. Maybe we should do better if you were by our side. Maybe we should do better if you would give us at least the credit for wanting to be true to our beliefs. It's more noble to help than to criticize. Come over and help us for God and the world's sake." End of quote. So may God's blessing go with you.